Hi everybody, it's Winters here. I had a recommendation from Gern to make a Guild War video about my Guild War bracket, and I thought some of you guys might be interested in it, so I thought I'd make one, and if you guys like it, please leave a like, and that way I'll know to make some more. I'm going to do it slightly differently to what Gern does, in that he generally just tries to show you the matches that he feels are interesting, or showcase something in particular, and I'm actually going to try and sort of talk through a little bit about what we've done to try and stay on top of being the best in our Guild War bracket, and then the other main guild in our bracket, Pain Train. So I'm going to start off with the Guild War lineup. Now, this is quite different from the lineup that we actually use when we're trying to get points. When you're trying to get points, you're trying to get 15 wins with no losses on your team. So basically, you're ideally trying to use just your 5 strongest. But when it comes to finals, replicating that is near impossible. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to get as many wins out of your strong teams, and then where you can pick up some extra wins against teams that have been worn down by your strong teams, you want to drop in one of your weaker teams. So to start off the lineup, we've got Beetle here. He's got quite a reasonable lineup with the Bria, DH, Asmo, Iceblink, Karmath, and Dasmoke. Personally, I'm not too big a fan of the tanking with the Bria, but I understand it for his lineup, because he's gone double speed on his Iceblink, so that he's maintaining a reasonable amount of crowd control, because he has no Michelle or Dark Athendol. So it kind of makes sense in the context of his lineup. Beetle is probably our 4th, maybe 5th best team at the moment. So I've dropped him in at start to start off the lineup, and I have no idea how I should pronounce this name. I've actually never really spoken to him before. I assume it's a him. So we've got this lineup in second. It's a little bit weaker, although it is quite a reasonable redemption lineup. It's just missing a few more stars, obviously. The Sigmund is nice tanking. The Iceblink and the Demon Hunter for the crowd control. Vesta is amazing. Gurki is personally a little bit poorly suited in this team, because he really wants to be tanking to get the most out of his holy damage boosts. But obviously when you've got the Sigmund, you should be using it in first slot, because otherwise he's just going to last till the end, be your last man standing, and then he's going to fall. No hero wins a fight on their own. So we dropped this team in second, so that ideally if Beetle takes out a team on his first match, and then he's weakened, and then in his second match or third match he loses, potentially this team can pick up a win against a team that they normally wouldn't beat. Same sort of thing with Hunter and Storm. Hunter is a stronger team, especially with the buffed Karam happening just before this Guild War final, and then Storm following after. Storm is a good choice for this sort of secondary position, because we've got the Flame Strike in the last position, which, if the enemy team has 6 heroes left, but they're all low, and you can knock a couple of down, Flame Strike's going to end that match very quickly. So this has quite a bit of synergy going on together. I do quite like this lineup. Obviously, the Michelle at 10 star would be nicer, and would sort of complete the crowd control with Michelle and Dark Elfendol going first, and then the nice tank Ice Blink coming in as well. Ideally, you would want to replace this with Vesa and this with Karmath, but as it stands, this is a pretty strong lineup. I dropped in 5th place. What Pain Train has been doing to us a lot of the time is we'll have our stronger teams at the top of the list, and they'll have their stronger teams at the bottom of the list, and because we don't match off against each other, both teams will get quite a high number of wins, and all it takes is 1 or 2 to go the wrong way, and we might actually end up losing potentially. So to that end, I'm sort of dropping in somewhere in the middle as probably our 3rd, maybe 4th best team. I'll explain that later. This guy used to be Quad X. I don't know why he's changed it. Like spades, club spades, but anyway. So what I've done here is I've tried to go from my lineup into another relatively strong lineup, so that if we're encountering a lot of resistance because Pain Train has put their strong members at the start of the roster to swap things up, both of these teams are going to come in one after another, and we might be able to put an end to that, but still not anywhere near our strongest. Wolf Cub comes in at 7th, basically right in the middle of the roster. I would argue that he's definitely our strongest lineup at the moment, although Miracle is giving him a run for his money. Rex drops in after Wolf Cub. Because of the Faith Blade on Wolf Cub's team, you're most likely going to be running into teams that have a reduced number of heroes, and in that sort of scenario, this sort of team makes a lot of sense. It doesn't have too much crowd control on the team, but with the Mickey providing some dodging, and the high DPS of the Walter, the Vesa, and sort of to a lesser extent the Aiden, this team has potential to pick up a win off the back of Wolf Cub, possibly on his sort of 3rd run. Miracle has a very similar team to Wolf Cub, in that they've both got the Faith Blade, they've both got the Michelle, they've both got the Ice Blink, they've both got the Vesa, they've both got the Demon Hunter. The only difference is the Ormus versus the Emily. Emily makes some interesting interactions happen, whereby the speed buff to Faith Blade is enough to push Faith Blade faster than a speed stone only Demon Hunter. So I still need to see some more matches to work out which is actually the stronger team, but certainly this team is doing quite well. He's using the deer pet to offset the healing that he's lost by not having the Ormus. whereas Wolf is going for more burst by using the Wolf pet, which because it's somewhat bugged and using its active essentially over one turn, you're getting 4 million true damage in the space of one turn, which potentially allows this team to end heroes much faster, keep proccing the energy boost on Faithblade, all that good stuff. So after Miracle, we've got Tywin. This team looks very solid, but Tywin is lacking a little bit in terms of guild tech, and therefore isn't quite as strong as some of the others, especially some of the others with this sort of lineup. Ben is running another redemption team. He's got the double ice blink in there for the juicy double freezes. I'm not quite sure about the Rosa. I do understand that it obviously completes his redemption lineup, but I would definitely prefer to see a Demon Hunter in here, possibly even a another Vesa. I know he's working on another Vesa. Other than that, he's still working on Asmo to replace Gurki with, and otherwise it's a relatively typical redemption lineup that doesn't have Faithblade. Jess has a relatively unique team. He was with us early on when the guild was formed, but then left for a while and has recently come back. So he's still working on his team a little bit, but he's tried to favour the fact that Demon Hunter has such a high crowd control rate, and especially with the buff to Demon Hunter's basic attack, this team is actually quite impressive. He needs to get a couple of energy artifacts going, but otherwise I do quite like this team. He is looking about changing this back to a full forest team in the not too distant future, but at the moment his 10-star Sigmund makes up for what the team would otherwise lack, because he's he would otherwise be running like a Guru or something it's just doesn't perform as well. I prefer to call this guy just BDR because it's much easier. So BDR has another lineup very similar to Beetle. He's gone for the Asmo tank. It does potentially allow you a lot more burst, but it also has the side effect of versus things like Dark Athendol. It's very easy for you to go an entire fight without Asmo getting off an active, and so potentially this lineup has some issues versus certain teams, but in our meta we're more versing a lot of redemption teams. There's not a lot of Dark Athendols, so you tend to find that this lineup performs fairly well. Our last two teams were actually relatively weak. Basically we were sort of counting on reaching the end of Pain Train's lineup somewhere in between Miracle and Ben, and ideally not as late as BDR, but potentially picking up a last win with BDR, and then maybe even picking up one after that with Vendetta. if we made it to Maddie as our last team, we were probably going to lose anyway. And this team is not ideally suited to sort of picking up wins anywhere in between, so that's why I didn't drop Maddie in somewhere in between. Actually, I will not show you that one yet. I will use this to show you Pain Train's lineup. So, Pain Train starts off with a relatively interesting Ruin lineup. He's gone for the double Dark Athendol and a Karmath, which is a really nice combo. Ideally, I believe that you would replace the Corpse Demon with another Karmath, but in terms of our teams, at least, it's very early for another Karmath, another 10-star Karmath. But this team will be very interesting once the Sakari reaches 10-star and the Corpse Demon becomes a Karmath, because you can drop Sakari into tank, and then this is just a very strong team. This is actually a lineup I'm sort of working on, where it will be double Sakari, double Karmath, and double Dark Athendol. Kaladin is one of their weaker teams, although has relatively meta heroes. Obviously, he's lacking a little bit. It looks like this is trying to be either a Justice lineup or a Redemption lineup, but he's lacking the other two heroes at the moment, so he's trying to fill with Abyss with what he's got. But this is a relatively strong lineup for a weaker team. Obviously, I don't know Chinese or Japanese or whatever language this is, so I'm not going to be able to tell you what the name is. This is a somewhat interesting Justice team. The concept is essentially it tanks, it heals as much as it can, and then most of the damage comes through Flame Strike and to a lesser extent Sigmund. I'm not too big a fan of this team because Guru is very non-meta right now. He doesn't tank as well as Sigmund, he doesn't deal as much damage as Sigmund. He's a one-trick pony that doesn't do that one trick very well. The Rosa is reasonable, but obviously lacking CC in this team means this team is very vulnerable to most meta teams out there at the moment. Kinu has another relatively common Redemption team. We've got the Rosa instead of the Demon Hunter, but otherwise relatively meta. Sir Stang, this is a nice rainbow lineup. It's something I considered briefly, except for I have the Dark Athendol. I don't have the Dasmog yet. So whether you drop in Corpse Demon and you tank with Corpse Demon, and therefore you're able to sort of free up your Ice Blink to focus on speed to make up for the fact that he's kind of slow, it sort of makes your team a little bit more flexible using Corpse Demon over Karmath. And Corpse Demon is like, he does surprisingly well. He even did surprisingly well before they buffed his active. Now that his active heals based off total HP rather than his attack value, he's actually very hard to kill. His strength is a little bit reduced at the moment because he's not facing a lot of warriors, where his freeze comes out into its own, going from 20 to 35%. But despite that, it's still a good hero. Very well balanced, I would say. It's not game breaking, but it provides a lot of strength to the team. If in this lineup you were to replace the Rosa for a Vesa, you would see this lineup last a lot longer against high damage teams, because everything, arguably except the Das Moog, is very tanky. So I like this lineup, even though it doesn't have a lot of CC, it has enough. Naif is another typical redemption team. Still needs to 10-star the Michelle, but otherwise very common. Okay, they didn't actually win enough games for me to show you the rest of their team. Okay, well, I'll jump into some of the matches. I've said that it's basically us as champions and Pain Train as the two teams that are the main competitors in the league, and I essentially say that because just about every match for Pain Train and us only has a few losses on both sides. So we've got one match in the entire list for Pain Train here. We've got 1, 2, 3 in that lineup. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So at best, half their lineup got beaten. And yet they lost to us. So it basically just tells you that there's a pretty big gap between Pain Train and us and the other teams. So I'll run you through some of the interesting matches here. So starting off, as I sort of envisaged, we started off with Beetle. He won his first match. He got through it relatively damaged, and then this team was able to pick up the win, even though Beetle didn't manage to actually kill any heroes on Kaladin's team. We got another win against this team, which I described as was relatively weak due to the fact that it's got no crowd control. Kinu came in with his very strong redemption team and scored 3 wins, which was not to be unexpected versus the 3 teams that he was against. None of them had full 10-star teams, so not too surprising, not too costly for us. I picked up the win against Sir Stang, which was pretty good for me considering the fact that I've got 3 warriors against his Corpse Demon. I was relatively weakened by that fight, so I lost to Naif. Triple or Quad X lost. Won against Naif and then lost his next match to Bilbo. Bilbo has typically been Pain Train's strongest team. He's been swapping a few things back and forth. He kind of settled on the Justice team recently because of the buff to the Demon Hunter passive, allowing him to put out some huge damage with the Demon Hunters while still having 4 crowd control characters. The Emily makes this team just a little bit juicier because it helps make up for the slow ice blinks, while obviously buffing the damage of all of them. And Vesa is just God tier Vesa. Wolf Cub managed to pick up the win against Bilbo, although Bilbo was slightly weakened by the loss of his Demon Hunter, and proceeded to beat the next two teams. Neither of these teams were hugely impressive. It's another double Ice Blink, but there's no aura going on here. The Faceless is very non-meta. The Walter and Bloodblade have both fallen out of meta because they're not particularly tanky. Especially Walter is very, very non-tanky versus reasonably high CC teams, because you just can't rely on the damage reduction on his active. Legans has an interesting team-ish, in that he's got one of the only Edgars in the current rotation. Edgar is not a bad hero. I'd almost go as far as to say he's a relatively balanced hero in the current meta. He just doesn't do anything relatively impressive. So even though Justice is very common, Redemption is very common, you don't see him replacing Demon Hunter or Vesa most of the time, or Rosa for the teams that don't have both. Unfortunately, Wolf Cub managed to win all three of his matches, so when Rex came in at the end, he was facing a fresh team. Rex still did reasonably well, managed down 2 heroes, which Miracle then proceeded to take out the next 3. These were all relatively weak teams for Pain Train, but at this point we'd passed their strength. Their 3 strongest by far are Kinu, Naif, and Bilbo. So at this point we were already sort of smooth sailing. But if the lineup had been different, potentially Miracle would be running into Kinu, into Naif, into Bilbo, and he might not have made it through even the second fight, possibly. Yep, so where were we? We were about here. This is a relatively weak team, as I'm sure most of you can tell. We've got the Starlight here, which is another non-optimal, not too bad Forest. She's a little bit weaker than Edgar, I would say. We've got the Divine Spirit 9-star, just to fill the aura, I guess. I wouldn't do this, like, ever. Divine Spirit is just so poor. It's not even worth the aura, unless, you know, your only other alternative is, like, I don't know, an 8-star something. Even then, the fact that he's spent the fodder to get this to a 9-star is horrific. Like, it's it's so bad. So much light fodder has gone into this, which the only way he could recover would be if they allowed you to then 10-star Divine Spirit, which you can't, and then you 10-star hero replaced it to something else. But unless they change Divine Spirit, which I highly doubt that they will, because currently there's no 4-stars that you can also 10-star, so just don't do this. Fat Moo, another terrible hero, relatively lacking crowd control apart from the Dark Athendol, which is really nice. One of the only Dark Athendols on Pain Train's team. So there's some potential here in the future, but he's got a few heroes to replace with more powerful ones. Thale has a reasonable lineup, although we need to 10-star the Mickey before she's a good tank in the current meta. You really need the extra HP that the 10-star gives you to be able to compete with the current teams that you're going to be facing in our bracket. I actually can't think of what his name is at the moment. Glenn. I knew it was something like very generic. Glenn, I guess I can forgive that. It is a 9-star, which means it can be foddered into something else very soon. Yeah, provides a little bit of healing, and they've already got the healing going with the Ormust, so it's not unreasonable, but yeah, it's not contributing a lot to the team. This is a relatively nice team. It's very, I wouldn't say it's exactly off meta, but it's got some non-meta elements to it, where I believe this is the Golem aura. We're running Golem with a Gurki, which is just a bad start. Can someone confirm for me that this isn't Snake? I'm pretty sure this isn't Snake, but anyway, if it is Golem, Golem, let me just quickly get back out. Golem gives you a buff to crit damage, 60% for 2 rounds on 4 allies, and it has a chance to petrify. Let me just get back into the list. None of these heroes particularly crit much except for the Vesa. So that buff seems a little bit wasted. The percent armor is a little bit wasted because none of these heroes have much armor. Personally seems like a bit of a poor choice. If it is Snake, it's still arguably a poor choice because you should always be running Wolf over Snake. The armor break on Wolf will always be better than skill damage on Snake. Well, I say always, it's almost always, and certainly with basically all of the meta heroes at the moment. Legend 27 has what could be a relatively nice rainbow team. Obviously need to 10-star the Dark Athendol. Probably want to replace the Walter with something else. I don't mind the Melissa. The fact that she slows enemy heroes kind of, in my mind, puts her probably 3rd in Forest. It's a toss-up between Melissa and Rosa. Skeleton? I feel like this is supposed to be a play on Skeleton, but I don't know. I don't know how you're supposed to say that. Has not a bad Justice team. Obviously, like, Justice is a good option because it allows you to get heroes essentially all through Prophet Orbs. It's much more achievable early on than anything involving light or dark heroes, but it has its limitations. You're relying on Demon Hunter and Ice Blink essentially for your crowd control, and both of them are going to be slower than your Dark Evandol and your Michelle. And potentially even we may see people in the future using Faith Blade for the 100% chance to stun 2, in which case still going to be faster than your Faith Blade and your Demon Hunter and your Ice Blink. As you can see, we've got all these relatively weak teams at the end, and we're easily picking up 2 and 3 wins. Taiwan, who isn't, as I said, has a relatively strong lineup, but a little bit weaker on the Guild Tech. Managed to pull in 2 wins. Just managed to scrape through with the Vesa. The other thing is, because we're attacking, you know that the team actually won as opposed to just lasted to round 15. But I am going to go through and show you some of these videos. And then we've got Ben right at the end picking up the last match, probably pretty easily. I'll demonstrate this one just to show you at the start the sort of differences between what is a relatively complete lineup versus a lineup that's sort of, well, it sounds a bit unfair to say in progress, but we've got Melassa, which is just a little bit lower than your Demon Hunter and your Vesa, and we've got Rosa, which is a little bit lower than your Demon Hunter and your Vesa. We do have one Demon Hunter. On Ben's side, you do have the Rosa as well, but you're complementing that with the Vesa, and you're taking the 2 light heroes for their relatively high performance. So I'll start off showing you this match. I'll actually start it again just so that I can sort of talk you through it a little bit. So Ben's running energy on this Ice Blink and managed what is an amazing 4 heroes frozen right to start with. So this second Ice Blink active did so much damage. The Michelle managed to stun 1, but was already frozen anyway. But that combo of the 2 Ice Blinks after the first one managed to freeze 4, it was just going to be ended very quickly. So a little bit of one-sided match. Yeah, so this is the Ice Blink that was running the energy. This is the Ice Blink that, and it actually makes a lot of sense to do it like this, because this Ice Blink is going to take a lot of hits. It's going to boost up his energy so that when his active follows, it's going to hit harder. Let's scroll up to some of the other matches. So this should be a somewhat interesting match because you've got the Dark Athendol on this side providing the fastest CC. You've got the second Dark Athendol to aid the Karmath, so the Karmath is potentially going to do quite a bit of damage. You've got 2 warriors on Beetle's side hitting into the Corpse Demon, so although this is not a full 10-star team, this team has a lot of potential against Beetle. So we don't have an energy artifact on this side, which puts him at a struggle to start with. The Demon Hunter goes off first and silences 2, which means Dark Athendol's never going to get off his Petrify. We get the massive active coming in from the 9-star Sakeri. Sakeri, if people aren't yet aware, got a huge buff this patch. So quite a bit of damage taken by Beetle, even though he got off to a really strong start. From here it should be a relatively straightforward win, but as you can see, he's so heavily damaged. Yep, and we get finished off with Berea. I'll just show you that again. So Karmath got a little bit of damage in, but it wasn't much. Almost all of it is coming through this Sakeri. We're almost all full health, and then as you can see there, that's about 7.5, maybe 8 million damage in one active from a 9-star. Sakari is very devastating if not crowd controlled now, especially because you don't even have to run damage on him because he can steal it with his basic attack. Yeah. I said 7.5. Maybe one of them didn't actually crit, and that's why we're only at about 6 million. I didn't fully see it properly. This Dark Athendol probably got off an active while it was below 30% HP, which is why this value is so high. Other than that, the Dasmog on this side never actually got to do anything, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it's not too uncommon when you're running the Demon Hunter and the Ice Blink, and to a lesser extent the Karmath, versus your Dark Athendol on the other side, even though Dark Athendol didn't have energy. So unsurprisingly, Beetle going into the next round with very little HP loses to this team. He manages a good Petrify right at the start, but it's not going to change much. That Asmo active did quite a bit of damage, and the fact that Vesa is petrified will mean that this team goes into the next round relatively weak and should be an easy pickup. That Vesa active does go off, but it only gets one tick. So we've got another energy Ice Blink, manages a wonderful 3 frozen, and the team is relatively easily put down. The Vesa took a little bit of damage, but it doesn't matter too much because the fact that she heals herself as well as healing the rest of the team means she should be able to heal that up fairly easily in the next match, assuming she doesn't get crowd controlled. And oh wait, we've got a team without any crowd control. Again, another relatively lucky double freeze, and managed to freeze on both the healers, which makes this relatively tanky team very untanky all of a sudden. Assuming we can get the kill on one of them relatively soon. There we go. So Demon Hunter picked up the kill. Didn't manage any freezes there, but it doesn't matter at this point. The charged up Gurki is able to deliver enough damage to take out most of the rest of the backline. Now this Flame Strike is very dangerous, but fortunately is silenced. If she wasn't silenced, this team would potentially all be dead at this point. Now, unfortunately, Vesa was silenced for a lot of the fight, so wasn't able to get off too much healing. So, as you can see at the end there, got back most of the health, but still managed to lose the Sigmund relatively early on. And as I say, this is a 9-star Vesa, and still managed to do 5.5 million healing despite being crowd controlled. This should be a relatively straightforward match. He's starting from a low position. Okay, Kino's not running speed on his Ice Blink despite having energy. That's interesting. Generally, if you're running energy, you want to pair it with speed so that you can get that crowd control in as early as possible. But as I said, this matchup is always relatively going to go in Kino's favor, being 5 against 6. Both healers have managed to get off some heals, so this team is basically going to be full health at the end of the match. As you can see, just a little bit missing off the ice blink. We got a good bit of damage out of the Gurkey, but it didn't matter because both Bessa and Ormus were uncc'd, and the deer coming in for what is that? A total 13, 15 to 16 million healing. Maybe it's 17 with Gurkey. 17 million healing when you're only putting out, I'm not going to add that up too quickly, but call that 10 million. It's unsurprising that his team is full health right at the end of the match. Now, as I said earlier, Kinu's facing some of our weaker teams, arguably, so he does pick these wins up fairly easily. This is Hunter, I believe. Hunter doesn't have an energy artifact yet, so is at a little bit of a disadvantage. Energy artifacts, well, they're very broken against teams that don't have one to start with. And Kinu's getting not too lucky with the crowd control, but the fact that he's versing Michelle's is actually allowing his team to get to full health at the end, because the Michelle lasts almost 2 full turns longer than any other hero. So for those full 2 turns, he's getting healing happening with basically no reply. So again, this is almost 19 million healing against a team that's done call that 6, 7, 8, 8.5, 12.5 million damage. Not surprising that it's still full health. As I pointed out, this is one active from Wolf, and it's 4 million true damage. Completely ignores armor, completely ignores damage reduction. Wolf is actually very broken at the moment, because it's supposed to deliver that damage over multiple turns, but it's delivering it all in one turn, all in one big punch. But still not quite enough to wear down the double healer lineup on Kinu, especially when the double healer is aided by the Rosa buffing up both of their attack. I'm going to skip over the Storm match because it should be relatively straightforward, unless the Flame Strike managed to get off 2 actives, which you wouldn't expect that with 3 9-stars on the team. So I've got off some good petrifiers to start with. The Demon Hunter was relatively unlucky, but now we've got most of his backline petrified, like essentially all of it, other than the Michelle, which can't be petrified, and that was an amazing active from Asmodel, which against his petrified team has done quite a bit of damage. He gets the the deer heal off, but by this time most of his team is dead because it's been delayed due to so much of their team being crowd controlled. I've taken quite a bit of damage, which is it's one of the issues with my team in Guild War at the moment, because I've got no healing. It's very easy for me to get worn down and not pick up a second or a third win. Especially when I'm facing what is a comparable sort of team, although I've got the edge on him in crowd control. So it's not too surprising that my highly weakened team doesn't pick up the win here. even though I managed to CC the energy Ice Blink, which makes my chances a lot better. Unfortunately, the Asmodel got stunned, so we didn't get the big active coming from Asmodel, much like his. And from here it should be a relatively straightforward win for them. That was a nice big crit for an Asmodel basic attack. And just the last nail in the coffin, getting a silence off so that I can't kill the Ice Blink. My Barrier in this match was running an anti-ranger artifact, so potentially that Barrier active would have actually been very devastating to his front line, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. I didn't get too much damage in, so this should be a relatively interesting matchup. Okay, because the Vesa dropped early, this silence went off turn 1 before all of the actives were available, so it actually worked out really well, the amount of damage that I'd done. It allowed basically the second turn to go uninterrupted, and even though his Dasmog was silenced, it didn't matter essentially, because the worn down team was able to be killed by Queen, Demon Hunter and Bloodblade. And because he's killing heroes consistently, the Bloodblade's getting some reasonable heals off, even though he would normally not be too tanky. That's providing plenty of recovery for him. And he ends the match relatively full life, which is probably why he manages to do so well against Bilbo, even though Bilbo's got, I believe, 3 energy artifacts, which with the double Demon Hunter is quite devastating. So yep, we've got 1, 2... Okay, so we've only got 2 energy artifacts. Potentially he's opted not to use the 3rd. Either that or I'm wrong. That was a very nice double active from Queen and Dasmog, dealing quite a bit of damage. We should see some healing coming back in here, because once again we've got a Michelle, and the Michelle's just going to last a little bit too long. Fortunately, that dot tick and the dragon is going to take down that Demon Hunter, which is why the Demon Hunter doesn't make it into the next match. But most of the other heroes are going to go into the next fight relatively healthy due to that drawn out period with the Michelle. She's almost a double-edged sword in that regard, unless you're using her in a position where she's going to get worn down. You need to be aware of the fact that using her is potentially going to allow your opponent to heal quite a bit. Now, Wolf uses energy on his Michelle for very first active potential. Faithblade picks up a nice critical kill on turn 2, but immediately gets frozen afterwards. We got the second Ice Blink active, dealing quite a bit of damage to him because he was frozen. But fortunately, with the triple healer setup and the directed heal from the Michelle, the Faithblade goes into the next match relatively healthy, even though we basically didn't get much out of Vesa. This is basically probably her heal off her first basic attack and nothing else. So that 500,000 was exclusively on to Faithblade at the end. And obviously Ormus is sharing his healing around. Because he went in relatively healthy, apart from the Faithblade, into this match, I should expect this match to go relatively straightforward, especially since he's not facing any energy artifacts. So, as you see there, with the heal from Michelle, he's already back to full health on the Faithblade. And once again, Faithblade is the star of the show damage-wise. Wolf is currently opting for a no energy setup on his Faithblade because he feels that running more damage is allowing him to get more consistent kills in turn 2. Plus it also allows your team to wear down their team a little bit more potentially before the active goes off, which means that it allows Faithblade to chain more reliably, whereby each kill powers the next active. I will skip over the Rex match. I know you guys love some more Faithblade action, so I'll play through this one. Obviously, coming into it relatively weak after facing Rex should be a relatively straightforward match. And the nice double kill for the Faithblade. And with the deer heal and a little bit from Vesa, the team survives that with no damage taken. This is facing a relatively weak team, so again, probably not too indicative of how much potential this team has. The fact that Demon Hunter went before the Dark Athendol tells me that Dark Athendol hasn't been set up properly. If you're not running energy on Dark Athendol, you should definitely be running a speed stone and a speed artifact. So not only is this team running a number of non-optimal heroes, also not setting up their stones properly. Potentially they don't have enough dust to complete the stone, but every little bit like this counts, and something like that stone would be, and a speed artifact is one of the things I would be trying to focus on as soon as possible. And I say it like that because even if Airborne only has a red speed artifact, at a Celestial 4 stone, Dark Athendol should still be faster than Demon Hunter. It's also possible that Airborne is missing tech, but again, if you're running a hero with the best crowd control in the game, you should be aiming to tech her speed as soon as possible. Yeah, this should be an interesting-ish match. So Tywin's gone in facing energy on the Ice Blink. He's lost the Queen first turn, but has answered with a double stun from the Walter. Fortunately, the silence from Vesa came right at the end of turn 2, so basically had no impact. The Wolf active there, yeah, okay, so this is the Golem. The Wolf active there, devastating his team, allowing him to end it having relatively weakened his team very early, getting it down to I think only 4 heroes at that point. So this team is running energy on Walter. I assume they're not running it on Dark Athendol because she's only a 9-star, but personally I would probably choose to run it on the Ormus, just because that way you can guarantee he gets off his heal. The Walter providing protection for himself doesn't provide enough impact for the rest of the team to justify that. Whereas the heal from Ormus can be enough to save 2 or 3 heroes, and potentially therefore has a lot more impact. So we've got Vesa and Gurki dueling it out at the end, and as you can see, Vesa with her superior healing picks up the win. And that damage comparison there basically just shows you that although Gurki is a light hero and gets a lot of buffs due to being attacked, he's still not good enough to stand up to Vesa. This damage comparison difference between Snake and Wolf essentially comes down to the fact that there was 3 dead before Wolf actually hit, whereas this managed to hit the full 4 heroes. Unsurprisingly, Tywin lost with only the Vesa left, so I'll just show you this last match. Wow, but managed to get a big crit off against the Melassa to leave her almost dead. So I know I showed you this this match at the start, but I just thought I'd round it out properly because we were sort of going through it in order. Okay, this video has gone on relatively long, but I'll just try and find a couple of other interesting matches from Pain Train and play through them relatively quickly. This is an interesting match. Naif's facing a 10-star Sakari. So that Sakari active did quite a bit of damage, but not quite enough, especially against the healing that Naif has. Most of the team was full health, and fortunately he managed to end it just before the next active, because the next active would have annihilated his team. That was an unlucky miss on the Azumarill from the Demon Hunter. Got some nice crowd control happening here, which is to be expected from the double Ice Blink, double Demon Hunter. Das Moog is getting through relatively unaffected, but doesn't quite manage to do enough, given the team was relatively unhurt beforehand. Oh, he avoids the dragon on the IB, but Berea manages to get off one last hit. So Bilbo with his weakened team lost here. This is another relatively interesting team, given we're running the Corpse Demon. So on the first round, Corpse Demon has frozen 2 and another on the third, because this wasn't even off his active. I expect Emily will probably die. Oh no. I was wondering if he was going to get the Corpse Demon active across the end. But we got the big crit from Vesa, hitting total 5 million damage, which ended the team fairly convincingly. Let's see if we can get one more. This should be a relatively strong comparison because we've got a Demon Hunter on both sides, a Ice Blink on both sides. We got a big freeze off from the first round Ice Blink. Now, unfortunately, because none of them are dead, this first round Flame Strike active hasn't done too much damage. And now we get the counter from Kinu, with most of the teams stunned and frozen. They're basically fodder. And I think what this match here is essentially highlighting is the impact that tech makes. None of this team has managed to make much of a dent, despite the fact that they got off the early crowd control, and not even 1 million damage from Sigmund either means that this Sigmund is not running reduced damage to be able to last longer, or is just very low tech. And so, as I say, this sort of matchup shows you that tech is just very important, because otherwise this team should have done a lot more damage. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. As I said, if you guys like the Guild War breakdown and want to see more, just leave me a like or a comment, and I'll see if I can do some more for you. Okay, thanks for watching.